What's the most important thing that happened on Tuesday night as it relates to the future of American politics and government? Single most important thing.
Ooh, man, that's tough. Well, I mean, obviously having elections and changes of leadership in all these states, that's just historically and for the future of the country, great. But I think that today and the day after, everyone, both parties, we are all talking about focusing on making people's lives better in terms of cost of living, of prices, of how we help average Americans live better lives. I think that's a positive to come out of a win or a loss, because that's what we're talking about today. And that's what the majority of Americans are worried about.
Doug, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, effectively the political director, James Blair, said our candidates made a big mistake. They talked about other issues rather than affordability of the economy. How could any candidate not know, any campaign not know that, of course, the exit polls, you don't need the exit polls to know, that's going to be the top issue for voters. How does that happen in a campaign?
So first I want to answer your question and then I'll get to that. I think the single most important thing that happened Tuesday night was Democrats proved that they can win elections.
Yep.
And then, there's nothing that succeeds in politics like success. And I do think it was to some extent, at least on the Daily Chatter, a circuit breaker so that we're not just talking about the 2024 election now in the Democratic Party. In terms of your question, it's probably a little ironic that the Deputy Chief of Staff of the President of the United States would criticize the candidates on Tuesday night for not talking about the economy and affordability when the President of the United States, who has the biggest bully pulpit in the world, never talks about it.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's kind of strange, too. Maybe he was trying to send a message to his boss as well. Kristin, pick up on what Doug said about Tuesday. So there's no doubt that winning is great and it changes the storyline and it gives a shot of confidence. People all say there'll be more donations, more volunteers. The big donors will get off the sidelines. Candidate recruitment will be better. Does that all happen for a party after a night like Tuesday organically and naturally? Or is it incumbent now for the Democratic committees to actually start to try to prime the pump off of it?
I think it's probably incumbent on the committees, but also the state leadership. So, we're talking about Congress and the Senate. There are a lot of gubernatorial races up next year. I think, leaders in each one of these states really need to step up and help recruit. One question I'd have for Doug, looking at the different candidate recruitment is so important. The Democrats at large, are you going to be recruiting more Abigail Spanbergers or more, Zohran Mandamis? I mean, they're two very different. I mean, before going to the election, I know, Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan basically said, that's good for New York, but don't try to tell me how to win here in Michigan. Is that going to be a problem for Democrats? Or, is there a stream? Because that's the other problem, too. Success sometimes has a lot of fathers. So you're going to have a lot of people in the Democrat Party saying, well, this was AOC's influence. No, this is the, resurgence of the blue dog Democrats. So how does that now work when everyone's really excited? Does it complicate that mission to recruit more, or is there a clear edict of where the party is going to go in that sense?
Well, having a big tent problem is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
I would say, first of all. And I don't think for Democrats, Mandami was a good thing for us. So let me just start with that, stating the obvious. But I also think that there's a genetic problem Republicans have, which is they overuse power. And there's a genetic problems Democrats have, which is we always underutilize power. And so I think the Republicans will put way too much focus on Mandavi. And because I think most people in America don't think New York applies to them and it doesn't really affect their lives. Now, having said that, it's not a positive for Democrats to have a guy. Let me just say about him for a moment. There's a lot Democrats could learn from him, how he campaigned, his use of social media, his aggressiveness on that. I think he raised a lot of important issues. I don't think his solutions are very good. But the thing I found as a Democrat most disheartening from him was the speech he gave Tuesday night when he won. He got 50.4% of the vote, which means half of the city didn't vote for him. And I didn't think that his speech was very gracious, and I didn't think he made an effort to try to govern for all of New York.
It was the least gracious victory speech I think I can remember anybody except Donald Trump giving at some points. And And I do think that he's had moments that were more gracious since then, for sure. But let me ask this about Mondami, and then I want to talk more generally. Republicans are clearly going to try to make an issue of him. And Doug, you said, as many Democrats who are more from the more moderate wing of the party said, this is not great. What can Democrats do to keep him from being the face of the Democratic Party? Republicans will try to do it. What can Democrats do to keep him from being, what the Republicans want him to be? Doug first, and then Kristin.
Well, he's going to do what he's going to do. He's got to run a city. He's made a lot of promises. He's not really, that I'm aware of, really articulate any kind of plan of how he's going to, perform and implement those promises. So he's going to have plenty to do on his own. But let me just say that as someone more from, as you say, the center part of the party, his economic populist message, I think, is the right one for the party, and that's what we should be talking about. But again, I don't think his solutions are necessarily the right ones, and I don't think we should be focusing on the social issues, obviously. But I think affordability and what people care about in their lives, which is what he ran on, is what the Democratic Party should focus on.
Yeah, Kristin, do you expect we'll be talking about him on a regular basis come the new year when he's in office, or he'll recede? Yeah,
I think so. And almost to reverse the question you asked, as Doug, I'm worried that Republicans will go too far with it and try to, we did that in some districts, in some races, making Nancy Pelosi a boogeyman works. The same thing with AOC and the squad. We went hard with it in 2022 in those midterms, trying to really, villainize AOC and her colleagues. In some races it worked, but not in all. And so I fear that we're going to go a little too far and be, I would encourage my, Republican colleagues, let's not get lazy and just default onto making him an enemy. I mean, every district's going to be different. And I suspect if he starts out he'll be in still a campaign mindset. He won't do anything too drastic to mess up the party at large. But, to back up to your original question, when you talk about whether it's the parties or, who kind of drives this, on the Democrat side, I'm really going to be watching to see which potential 2028 candidate steps up. I mean, on election night on Tuesday, I thought Gavin's speech was probably one of the best, Gavin Newsom, out of anyone. I mean, he looked like a leader. So is he now going to go and use his resources and his efforts and start his own recruitment across the country, start his own, or is it going to be Josh Shapiro or AOC? See who on that side kind of emerges as being the party leader. The Democrats are going to have a moment now where if I'm, running Gavin Newsom's operation, I say, okay, let's go get our super PAC up and running. Let's go pick 20 candidates we're going to support in 2026, and let's go to the wall for them to make sure they're going to win. That's, I think, the dynamic that Democrats will have that Republicans won't necessarily have this time around. And it's going to be really interesting to watch because it's going to show where the Democrat Party is shifting in terms of where they're going to be both in 26 and then in 28.
Well, I think increasingly civilians, normal people, when they see stuff like Republicans running ads against the mayor of New York, increasingly they have a little buzzer that goes off that says, oh, this is just politics.
Yeah.
This is a bunch of crap. And they tune it out. The other thing is, though, that I suspect that they're going to spend a lot of time using him next year because, first of all, Trump doesn't do anything but base-oriented messaging, and midterm elections are all about turning out your base. So I think they're going to find it irresistible to not make him a central issue to try to get their base out to vote.
Yeah. Doug writes memos every few months that are singular in America because he brings all to bear all of his experience and clarity and fair-mindedness about where things stand, and isn't afraid to write if the Democrats have a problem. You can see the memo if you go to my Substack, Wide World of News, if you want to link to the latest one. And Doug, just as we finish up this block, the midterms, explain why just because Democrats did well on Tuesday doesn't necessarily mean they'll take back the House majority.
Well, we've gone through a historic transition in American politics, and it's based on something that began actually long before Donald Trump ran for president, which is education levels now are the best predictor of how people are going to vote. And that really first showed up in politics in the early 90s with the Perot campaign. And Trump's victory in 2016 and his presidency really solidified that education is now the new fault line in American politics. We know the education level of a voter you have a pretty good idea how they're going to vote. And so, as a result of that, we go by historical standards of president's job approval and all these other kind of metrics to predict the outcome of the midterms next year, and they're no longer valid because of how politics has changed. And so they're only right now in the most recent Cook political report, there are only 37 House districts they consider competitive. 37 out of 435. So it means 90% of members of the House are more vulnerable to lose a primary than a general election. So where I'm most confident right now as a Democrat about the midterms next year is the political environment that we're going to be operating in. I think Trump will have the lowest job approval of any president in history. All the economic signs suggest to me that it's going to get worse in the next 11 months, not better. But the challenge for Democrats is how are we able to translate this great political environment to overcome the structural challenges we have right now to benefit politically. I mean, we have 35 Senate races up. The Republicans are defending 22 seats. But right now, there are only 6 races that are considered competitive because of how the education levels are driving the outcome. Just to give you one last quote, statistic, 80% of the counties in this country, the winning presidential candidate's margin in 2024 was more than 20 points.
It's incredible. That's just incredible.
So the challenge for Democrats are going to be, how can we expand the pool of competitive races to take advantage of what I think will be a great blue wave environment?
Yeah. So say it in a slightly different way. The size of the wave to put more seats in play would have to be massive, because the next range of seats after those 37 are very red, and you'd have to overcome that extraordinary hurdle. I
mean, you've got Clinton's job approval on the election day of 94 was, I think, around 7 points, 8 points higher than Trump's right now. And the Republicans took back the Congress for the first time since the early 1950s, won 54 House seats. So if you just use that as a metric, and if Trump's job approval stays the same, then the Democrats should pick up 80 House seats.
Right, but they'd have to win races in districts that are out of reach. Kristin, who's the favorite to win House control in November next year, or is it too soon to say?
I think it's too soon to say. I think, the one point on presidential approval, I will say President Trump has pushed the norms of everything that we normally would talk about in terms of political trends and history. His approval could be low, and I still don't think it necessarily translates, although sometimes it'll translate to a down ballot Republican and just not him. So we'll see how that goes. I think the shutdown is going to be extremely important, how this all wraps up and who is seen as being the problem solver. If somehow Republicans, we don't appear to be the ones who are the adults that come to the table and solve the problem and get everything back up and running and get costs down, then I think we really do risk losing seats that we otherwise wouldn't have learned. The one thing from Tuesday that I thought was interesting and just not necessarily take too much out of it, but a little bit of a caution, is that education break actually, the Democrats won a little bit more non-college educated than I think Harris had or Democrats had in the past. So this affordability issue that we are all talking about, we are all, focused on the cost of living, is, both parties are going to race here to make sure, either Republicans maintain it as the issue that we are more trusted on, or Democrats have an opportunity to drive a wedge to try to peel some of those working class voters back. I don't know if the Democrat candidates will be able to do it, but we'll see. We've only had 3 other off years, 1993, 2005, and I think 2009, where one party took Jersey and Virginia and then went on to go get the House. So we're kind of in very rare territory here. And, I would say that the shutdown and which party really holds on to that cost of living message will be the one to win next year. I just don't know which one that'll be.
Well, 2 things. First of all, the problem which Trump raised on Wednesday, actually with great pride, was the reason Republicans did poorly was because he wasn't on the ballot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a big issue. The other, though, is because we're out of power, all we got to do is put pass the laugh test plan on the economy, because no one is holding us responsible for the economy because we're not in charge of anything.
Right.
So the Republicans are going to own the economy. And I think we're way past the point of this now. remember the Secretary of Treasury said this week that some sectors of our economy are already in recession. But we are now past the point where Trump can't blame Biden for the state of the economy.
Yeah, it's testament to Scott Besson's magical powers that he didn't take heat for saying some part of the economy is in recession.
He's too big to fail now. He's like the lifeline they've got to like Wall Street. And, if he went out, they'd be stuck with Letnick. And can you imagine what that would be like?
Yeah, or a Democrat for some reason survive that.
Democrats do risk, though, I will say, even though Republicans would own the economy, Democrats risk what they made the mistake in 24 of not paying enough attention to it. So that was one of Trump's most effective message that, saying Harris cares about these culture wars. She doesn't care about your bank account. Democrats, especially with, when you get radical, very, very far left candidates, they risk talking about things that people don't care about. And I think we saw some of that on Tuesday in the opposite direction. But I mean, that's the Democrat risk, is that they don't give it enough attention and they get distracted by, their base issues.
Well, you're right. But, politics is a lot like fashion. So whatever's hot, everyone wants it. And I don't think there's any Democrat in the world right now off of Tuesday's elections that thinks that they should talk about anything except about affordability. And for, 400 out of 435 390 out of 435 House races, it doesn't matter who the candidates are. So the only candidates that matter are in these competitive seats. And for the most part, Democrats are not running far left candidates in these 10% of the districts that matter.
Not so far. There's some primaries, but you're right, not so far. Here's a tough question for you. Are you being lied to? They tell you should max out to your 401k and your IRA, and then they make you beg for permission to use your own money. It's time to get the truth and discover a better way to grow and protect your money. Bank on Yourself is the proven retirement plan alternative to banks and Wall Street desperately hope you never hear about. It gives you guaranteed growth and tax-free retirement income. Your plan stays protected even when there's a market drop. You're in control with access to your money anytime for emergencies or opportunities that come along. There are no penalties or restrictions. And even when you use your money, it keeps growing like you never touched it. Plus, with built-in inflation protection, your savings grow by a larger dollar amount every year. It's real financial security, real peace of mind with a retirement plan that works for you. You can get a free report that reveals how you can bank on yourself and enjoy tax-free retirement income, guaranteed growth, and control of your money. Just go to bankonyourself.com/Mark. That's bankonyourself.com/Mark. Get your free report. Again, bankonyourself.com/Mark. Try it now, bankonyourself.com/Mark.